So I was thinking about what more prospects should I talk about in a way of, being different than expectations. Either someone we all thought was going to be good who busted, or someone who we all thought was going to, or at least a lot of people thought wasn't going to be that good, exceeding expectations. And Lamar Jackson's a great example of exceeding expectations. He was a first round pick, but barely. If he was picked one pick later, he wouldn't have been. So that first round pick, it barely happened, but he ends up being an MVP. So no matter what you want to say, people still will criticize him to some degree, but I think there's no doubt about it. He certainly has exceeded expectations. And let's talk about what he was as a prospect and what maybe we could learn from Lamar Jackson and learn from that evaluation. So these are his strengths as listed from Warner Football, which is a laundry list of strengths. I mean, look at all of this stuff. You go from arm talent to obviously his, incredible athleticism, which is, fantastic. I mean, basically on this list, they just list everything that a quarterback could do well. That's essentially what you're going to see on this one. And then in weaknesses, you go to the very first one and it says inaccuracy and you say, oh, right. Yeah. Of course, for sure. I guess the one thing he doesn't do well is throw the football, which, seems like a fair critique to have. Poor footwork, which is interesting. The thin frame, he needs to get stronger for the NFL, which clearly that didn't end up being that big of a deal. And sometimes that's what you see is sort of these nitpicks. And you also see too much of one of the guys could stand to be more of a leader, which I just don't understand how that's a criticism whatsoever. His teammates like him too much. That's an issue. That's kind of funny to me. And then an alarming Wonderlic score. Again, these are nitpicks, and obviously it's easy to say that going back in hindsight. I'm not trying to dig it up and say, look how dumb they are. If you watch any of my, I've made plenty of mistakes as well. Certainly not trying to bash them by any means. They do good stuff. So what if this was true and what if this wasn't true? It's interesting to think. And so I went back and watched some Louisville games and tried to just look at what is true and what isn't true and what did we just miss as a whole. So we'll start off with this play. It's going to be a play action. You have a receiver running over the middle. Lamar is going to fake a handoff, run to the bottom of the screen. That's the route he wants to end up throwing to. Against zone coverage, this should work out pretty well. Lamar takes the snap. He is going to eventually roll out. And you see, that's a really accurate throw. His footwork could have maybe potentially been a little bit better. I see what they're coming from there. But at the end of the day, when it's an accurate throw, it's an accurate throw. Who really cares, I think? And you had stuff like this, which we all know about, where it's going to be Lamar is going to fake a handoff. He's going to run it himself to the top of the screen. And once this play starts, you see him fake the handoff. He does start to get up to the top of the screen, but look out. There is a Florida State defender right there who can potentially come in and make a play. So that's a potential issue, right? And this is kind of where I think things really get interesting, sort of evaluating Lamar Jackson after we already know he's going to be a great NFL player. Because watch him make this move, incredible move, and he gets into the end zone for a touchdown. Now, that is an incredible move. You can't watch that and think any way differently. But at the same time, you can't watch that and say, man, what were these people missing? Because you kind of understand it, right? Like, yeah, okay, that's great. He can, break the ankles of a college defensive end. Well, how well is that going to work out in the NFL? Especially when you're a quarterback. And it's not like we really see quarterbacks run the ball 15 times a game at this point. So it's like, we're not really expecting a Lamar Jackson to come in and have success, which, that's kind of why I like looking at these, because I like trying to say how much of this is fair and how much of this is unfair. Like how much of why Lamar Jackson fell through the cracks, because I wasn't evaluating quarterbacks at this time. So I want to see, was it just, analysts are being dumb, or was it he legitimately just got better, or there were just things that we didn't know to look for? And I think it's probably the last one. I don't think we really knew to look for some of this stuff, but his incredible movement along with his big arm is a real thing that we probably should have realized. I keep saying we, I'm not sure why, because I had nothing to do with it. But I think that's something that more people should have probably realized before he was drafted. So like something like this is a great example, I think, where you're going to see that that player who I've circled in yellow, it's going to be a blitz. He's going to get through pretty untouched. So maybe you could argue Lamar Jackson needs to pick up the blitz better, but the reality is, yeah, you're going to see why that's silly once they show to play. So Lamar takes the snap. He does fake a handoff, and watch how he's able to just sidestep that player right there and gets back on his feet in a way where he can get his shoulder square, get his feet planted, and now he's going to take a shot. And watch this throw. Just again, flick of the wrist, super far down the field, perfect accuracy. That deep ball is incredible. He could do it with pretty good consistency in college, and he can move around really well. So the fact that we could see him do that in college means we probably should have, I think we probably should have realized, hey, maybe he can do that in the NFL to some degree as well. Maybe we need to be higher on him than we are. Now, I'll show one more play. To everyone's credit, there absolutely were some missed throws. You can't get around that. This play, it's a cover one play. You have a receiver running a go route towards the sideline, so that's the way this play is supposed to work. It's a pretty good route against this type of coverage, so I suspect that, this is one that you think should work. But when Lamar takes the snap, you are going to notice that, he just completely misses this throw. And we've seen him do that in the NFL as well, where he'll just every now and then just completely whiff on a throw. But I guess the question should be, is that the same as being inaccurate? Really, what I mean is, obviously, it was an inaccurate pass, but there's a difference between bad accuracy and inconsistent accuracy. And I think he had inconsistent accuracy. He would go sometimes 12 passes in a row of making very accurate throws, and then he would just completely whiff on one. And I think that there's, you can miss a throw occasionally and still have a lot of success, especially with what you do is so good. I also think it's just worth mentioning that a lot of what makes Lamar great is his running ability. Like, there's no denying that. I think his passing game is still, at this point, it's still underrated. I think people need to realize that, no, he can be a pretty good thrower. But the reality is, what usually makes him great is going to be his ability to run with the football. And he can do that really well in the NFL. He can do that really well in college, obviously. And it was just kind of hard to predict exactly how well would that work if you draft him going into the NFL. And also, is it worth spending a, top 10 pick, for example, on him if he's going to end up getting hurt and not really playing that well? So I kind of get why he fell so far in the draft. Obviously, at this point, Baltimore is very happy they selected him. They would have selected him higher had they realized, how good he was going to be. So you kind of get it. But at the same time, I do think that there's enough here that you could at least see, like, okay, I see what could happen here. There's potential. And it kind of just goes to show, if you're spending a late first round pick on a player whose upside is MVP, take that. A superstar quarterback, that's totally worth the risk of giving up, probably someone who's going to be a pretty solid player, right? Like, that's typically what happens with that pick. I just think take the chance, get the Lamar Jackson. And I think there was some stuff here in hindsight we could have seen. There were some real concerns as well, though. So I can't really kill anybody who was down on Lamar, but clearly, it was one that I think 31 teams maybe would like to have back, although not exactly because teams picked twice. But you know what I mean? Hope you guys enjoyed this video. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.